Okay, if you're at a consulate and you receive this, as well as making certain that it gets to the right people in your country, you should also have your government make sure that all the other consulates receive this. Hell, everybody in the United Nations should know about it, but particularly Russia, China, Japan, England, Germany, Mexico, Australia, France, Canada. If you watch the movie Who Killed the Electric Car, you see the treason against man, all of mankind, basically by the likes of George Bush. The more people know about it, the harder it is to suppress the technology for the benefit of your own country, because the more widespread the implementation, more rapid the implementation, the faster fuel prices fall in the world, the faster the peak oil problem gets repaired, and the less destruction will be suffered by your economies. I'll try and keep in touch, but I've had some significant problems in the past with internet censorship, censorship of the telephone, the mail. I got my own theories as to why, but it dates way back into the 1980s. Computer data records that prove the internet censorship. The rest of it I really can't. I can try and keep in touch by mail or telephone, but I have a doubt that it would be successful because of my past experience. And my current situation is not really that great economically, and it's going to get worse. I've been staying in California, but my car cannot pass California emissions. Pretty much have to get out of California just for that reason alone. When I do, my income's going to get reduced by about $150 a month, and I'm already living on about $850 a month, something like that. It's pretty hard to survive on that kind of money. I'm not sure where I'm going to go. I'm going to try to find a place in Oregon and then make contact again so that you know where to find me. If that doesn't work, I'm going to look toward trying to find a place in New Mexico. Try to deal with some of those papercrete experts down there. Possibly Sapphire Energy down there in New Mexico. I may end up going back to Oklahoma. If I do, I'll visit my old friend TJ, Thomas Hall on Wolf Street, WOLF, in Lawton, Oklahoma. Probably able to pick me up there. Yeah, usually I got my 2.4 gigahertz video cameras operating and transmitting in my car when I'm out on the highway, where I can actually be tracked that way. It's hard to say where I'm going to end up. I know I got to take off out of here probably on the 1st of June. So I couldn't really tell you where exactly I'm going to be. If nothing else, if you wanted to find me, if contact is lost, I might consider waiting 2 or 3 or 4 months from now, rigging a microwave oven so that it can operate with the door removed, pointing it toward the satellite belt, and firing it up for about 2 or 3 minutes, Mondays at 9 o'clock. That's like a nuclear weapon going off. If a satellite is looking for it anywhere in the United States, you could triangulate the position of it. Or if you got access, some hackers that can get into the internet at the backbone entry points, search for the word terraforming master, Speedbox, aeroponic, check on access to RT.com, the Kaiser report. I like to get on and watch the Kaiser report. You can check for access to RT.com, possibly find the general area that way, and then look around the area for the 2.4 gigahertz video cameras. A lot of people know the history of the Jesuits, especially in Europe, Russia, in the Orient, known as a troublemaking organization that causes war, death, suffering. Probably causes more death and suffering than any other organization in history. Band of annoying religious fanatics. I see in the United States it was nothing but progress and improvement, with the exception of the criminal faggotry that caused the Great Depression, the Ponzi scheme that got ran in the stock market. But it seemed to be nothing but progress and improvement all the way up to Ronald Reagan. Reagan was a Knight of Malta. Every president of the United States since Reagan has been a Knight of Malta, which is basically an arm of the Jesuits. And it's been nothing but decline in the United States ever since. Nothing but progress, improvement before that, and nothing but decline ever since. Most people in Europe and in the Orient know that the Jesuits were responsible for Napoleon, for Adolf Hitler. And near as I can tell, they're also responsible for George Bush. My personal theory is that the Bush family is basically vengeance against the United States for the United States kicking Nazi Germany's ass back in World War II. And, the retards in this country kind of deserve, to some degree, just for being a bunch of retards, almost deserve it to some degree. I mean, the Bush family was part of the German-American Bund back in World War II. In less than 25 years after World War II, the first George Bush, the first President Bush, became head of the CIA in the United States. I mean, that's kind of stupid. And the Bush family, probably lost 200 relatives in World War II over there in Germany. Probably swore vengeance against the United States. The Congress had to pass a special law from keeping the first President Bush's father from selling weapons to the Nazis. The family was part of the German-American Bund. In less than 25 years after the war, retards in this country let the first George Bush become head of the CIA, and then president, in other words, head of the military. It does explain so much. It's a theory that happens to fit the facts pretty well. I'm thinking that possibly explains a few things. The censorship issues I've had to deal with, my getting crapped all over when I should have been basically a hero. You can ask the Russians about, like, December 23rd, 1988. For that, and for the government starting to make $100 million a year in extra tax income because of me, I should have got a vast amount of respect and gratitude, basically been viewed as a hero. Instead, I get crapped all over. There's only so many possible explanations for that. The Jesuits are one of them. Either Nazi land or Limey land. It could have been just over them being pissed off because I cost them 50 to 60 million a year in extra tax income they could have had. And the railroad invention made the United States 100 to 120 million a year in extra tax income, but it did it at the expense of the Limeys and the Nazis, the British and the Germans. Some people say the British have been running the United States since 1933. President Roosevelt's first official act as president to confiscate all the gold and silver from Americans and give it to the British. And supposedly we've been in debt peonage to Britain ever since. I'm not sure which, one of the two. And near as I can tell, they both fall under the same umbrella as the Jesuits. Yeah, the Holy Roman Empire. God says, "Thou shalt not kill." What does the Pope do? Organizes massive armies and sends them out on the Crusades, killing, raping, pillaging, plundering, bringing the plunder back to the Vatican. I guess the Russian Orthodox Church finally got tired of the bullshit after about the Fourth Crusade, split off from the Holy Roman Empire. Near as I can tell, that's where the seat of God got transferred over to Russia. Left the Vatican for greener pastures. You see act after act of treason out of the U.S. government ever since George Bush has been running the CIA, particularly over energy policy. The United States got 300 to 1,000 years worth of natural gas. We never needed to import oil, not a drop of it. I mean, the facts prove that we had this reserve. Could have switched the automobiles over to natural gas. I see Obama is finally getting around to doing it to some degree, to trying to do it. Then in 1984 we had the Biomass Fuels Research Program that proved that there was a limitless supply of natural gas available in the form of natural gas from giant sea kelp out of the Gulf of Mexico. Enough natural gas to power the entire planet. And all that had to be done was to go and harvest it. We had thousands of Liberty ships left over from World War II that could have been converted. Now there's not a hope in hell of doing it because you'd have to build thousands of ships. The economy simply doesn't support it. But those people basically flushed that down the toilet and started destroying the United States economy with oil imports. And I think I specifically got targeted because I've tried to invent energy technologies. The Speedbox isn't the first. There have been 2 or 3 others. Successful others. I'm going to explain it to you sometime, I guess. At any rate, it's very limited what I can accomplish while I'm getting crapped all over by a bunch of traitors or malevolent foreign plants. Very little. I'm surprised I was able to accomplish anything. Those consulates that receive this should consider this a request for political asylum. Near as I can tell, the only way to benefit my country is to leave it. Go to some place where the treason isn't as effective, and reduce oil prices in the United States by dropping the world demand for crude oil elsewhere, particularly in China and India. There's another reason I'd want to leave and go to another country that I'll touch on in a couple minutes here. But I would prefer Russia because of the female situation over there, outnumbering males 1.9 to 1 of my age range, just for that reason alone. I wouldn't need any other. I believe that would be to my benefit and Russia's benefit, a mutually beneficial situation. I've been trying to marry some Russian female over the internet at Kremlin.ru for the last 6 years. Russia would be my preference, but I guess China would work. Give me some Filipino geisha girl translator. Japan would work. Failing any of that, Europe would probably work, or Australia. I already tried to go into Canada. You can talk to the border station at the north of Seattle on the 5 freeway. After that retarded bullshit, I wouldn't want nothing to do with those annoying faggots. At any rate, the treasonous criminal retards that infiltrated the government over here haven't only royally screwed the United States, they've screwed over numerous other countries, in fact just about everybody else. My potential getting crapped all over and flushed down a toilet, the resultant delay in my developing the Speedbox, which was my spiritual function, which got delayed by that crap Minnesota poll in '86, damaged my spiritual connection. It's a freaking miracle I survived, let alone ever invented anything, did anything I was supposed to be doing again after that. To this day, I never repaired my spiritual connection. A huge loss. But it cost the United States a provable minimum of $49 trillion so far in economic damage. Somewhere between 49 and 147 trillion worth of economic damage by delaying the technology. In other words, delaying the end to oil imports, the largest transfer of wealth in the history of man, successfully by 7 to 20 years. It's done the same thing to China. China's been screwed anywhere between approximately 50 to 150 trillion dollars. Europe has been screwed. Any all-important country on the planet's been royally screwed economically because of this. Hopefully China will see this and get pissed off about it and demand an apology. Now China's not like the treasonous faggots over here that make the largest economic contribution anybody ever made, or even, make $100 million a year in extra tax income for the government. They're not going to get this thanks chump. Now live in a ghetto and beg for food stamps. Because what? My potential, my capability as an inventor represents a threat to the traitorous foreign plants attempting to destroy my country. Interferes with their plans or whatever. I'm not going to get that out of China. In fact, as soon as China realizes I'm right about the Speedbox, and knows full well it's the largest economic contribution anybody ever made to China, I could probably ask them for $5 million, $10 million just as a personal favor, and they'd do it. Okay, I said earlier I got silver poison, and I didn't point out how I got it. A bunch of religious scam-running maggots from the Soviet Union way back in the 80s were breeding devil worshippers and religious fanatics. I guess I don't have really time on this DVD to describe my entire life and my entire history or anything. Joseph Stalin said America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold: its morality, its patriotism, and its spiritual life. If we can undermine these 3 areas, America will collapse from within. Stalin, a man of action, not just mere words, killed 1 million of his own people. thing was to irradiate people's silver dental fillings with X-rays, puts the silver into their nervous system, then makes them sensitive to the emissions of television sets. Most of the vast majority of television sets back at the time broadcast silver absorption frequency X-rays and ultraviolet. Either you know about the phenomenon of silver poison or you don't. If you don't, you'd be wise to find out about it. Save your people from it. Most of the countries on the planet, to my understanding, have outlawed silver dental fillings. The government here still keeps it a secret for some reason. Yeah, but anyway, I was a guitar player and I was good enough to play in a national rock band. Because of that, I ended up being a target for the scam. If I would have sold my soul to some Soviet maggot masquerading as Satan, I probably would have died of a drug overdose 10-15 years ago after playing in some national satanic heavy metal rock band. A lot of people say I'm pretty good playing a guitar, but I suck so bad now compared to where I used to be. I'm embarrassed to pick the thing up anymore. I think maybe possibly it might explain George Bush. I'm still thinking it's more likely the Nazi thing, but it could be victims that are retarded religious scam that went on involving the Jesuits. They were already annoying, dangerous, destructive religious fanatics to begin with before that. I can imagine what it transmuted them into, even something even worse than they were to begin with. As far as my exposure to the religious scam, I wouldn't go along with it. I said I'd rather suffer and die if I had to serve God than sell my soul. And shortly after that, basically because I'd asked God for help, God gave it, and that's how I ended up with my spiritual function as an inventor. I guess silver poisoning doesn't just make you sensitive to frequency, sensitive to the emissions of television sets, sensitive to empathy. It can make you empathic, it can even make you psychic. But it also increases the strength of your spiritual connection. That's basically how I ended up with my spiritual function as an inventor. And I wouldn't be so quick to discard it. If you know I'm right about the Speedbox, unless you're a complete retard, you should see that there's a respectable probability that I'm right about it. Then it isn't that far-fetched, considering the Speedbox is the largest socio-economic contribution in the history of man. And that's not no small accomplishment. The only questions are, does the money exist to pay for it, and is it a valid concept? If it's a valid concept, then obviously the money exists to pay for it, given the system of money creation in the banks. As long as there's a guaranteed return on investment, there is always money that can be printed up to pay for whatever it is. The cost isn't the issue, it's the functionality. At any rate, God himself put an end to the Soviet religious scam running bullshit December 23rd, 1988. He tracked down Spot, Gorbachev, the real one, not the fake one, temporary tattoo on the head. Last seen hawking women's handbags in New York City. I asked him if he knows anything or remembers anything about the Soviet Armenia earthquake back on December 23rd, 1988. It's a long story. This DVD don't have room to describe it all. But it was a spiritual attack. 50 dead religious scam running Soviet maggots and 24,950 innocent Soviet Armenians died that night. There's actually numerous witnesses around who know what happened. The first time spiritual attack had been seen since Atlantis 4,000 years ago. Okay, now let's fast forward to 2004. Somebody from Japan comes over, breaks their own code. It's against the code in Japan to steal. Nobody steals from anybody in Japan. Nobody locks their doors because there's no theft, there's no burglary. Back in the past, if someone would have committed the offense, they would have committed suicide on their sword for it. If you steal in Japan, it's not the police you got to worry about. It's not the judge, it's not the jail. It's the Japanese mafia. They don't allow thieving. That's not to say there's no crime in Japan. The Japanese mafia is like a second branch of government. It's no different than any other government, really. They demand money for protection and services, which is basically what a government does, pretty much. Extorts money out of people in exchange for protection and services. Only they're not so limited by a stupid bureaucratic rule book over there. They can deal with individual issues. It's probably a more intelligent system than anybody else has. I guess at some point long ago in their history they learned uh, through experience or through spiritual guidance that theft, there was no way to tell how much damage and destruction a theft could cause. There was some dim perception of the United States. It's still on the books in Oklahoma and Texas, the death penalty for cattle rustling, for stealing cows. It was determined that it could cause so much damage to a man's existence that it warranted the death penalty. The tsunami in March 2010, during the first week, the only aid that came into the destroyed areas was from the Japanese mafia, none from the Japanese government. So, within 2 or 3 days either way of October 23rd, 2004, October 28th, 2004, after I invented a means of eliminating the cost of running an air conditioner in an automobile by powering it off the waste heat of the engine, somebody from Japan takes out a patent application on my invention. And I warned the Japanese that it wasn't cool. I had a working hydroponic greenhouse at the time, which eventually mutated into the aeroponic greenhouse, the model of which you see being destroyed on one of those YouTube videos, and then the aeroponic Speedbox. And I said it wasn't cool, crapping all over a spiritual matter. So it's not just stealing from me, it's stealing from God. It's stealing food out of the mouths that are starving. And Japan got subjected to spiritual attack at least 2 or 3 times. Christmas 2004, 230,000 dead people was just a warning to the Japanese that God could annihilate Japan off the face of the planet. The Japanese got to be all apologetic and agreeable after that, worked out a deal, and the government here proceeded basically to declare war on God, stood in the way of it and wouldn't let me go and deal with the Japanese. The administration, if that's what you want to call it, at the time, knew full well, because some U.S. Navy admiral dude come begging around my door to leave off the spiritual warfare with Japan until the Navy could get out of Japan. They try leaving Japan. They start withdrawing. You can ask the Japanese if the laundry people, the people that run the pop machines, the trash hauling, garbage truck people, if they got all told that we weren't going to need your services anymore by the U.S. Navy. And then they got all hired back the next day, because one of the 4 people in the United States who could give the order to halt the withdrawal and go back did just that. The withdrawal out of Japan got halted, the Navy got ordered to stay in Japan. Okay, now this is no small thing. Just as a warning to the Japanese that their attempted theft risked causing the starvation death of people God was trying to help. God wastes 230,000 totally innocent people. Christmas 2004. Okay, now these criminal traitors over here rose up against God and actually killed 152 million people. The facts that exist say that 152 million people were sentenced to starvation death by the government interfering with the deal I tried to make out with Japan. I didn't commit any crime. I exercised my constitutional rights to be secure in my person and property through the free exercise of religion. The only crime that got committed was by the government interfering with it. Now, to my knowledge, because a bunch of criminal maggots declared war on God, there's going to be justice and vengeance for those 152 million people that got sentenced to slow suffering, starvation, death. And either the United States, after I die off, is going to lose 152 million people, and the faggot Fourth Reich is also going to lose that many, the Jesuits, whatever you want to call it, or else it's going to get split up between the United States and the Jesuits. And the facts prove beyond a reasonable doubt that as many as 512 million people got sentenced to starvation death because of the criminal cesspool here in this country. The facts prove beyond any possible doubt it's at least 152 million people. Now, Japan committed a considerable spiritual offense, but they tried apologizing for it and making it right. The whole spiritual insult that got cast by Japan got transferred onto the United States. I'm not going to waste my time trying to tell anybody in the United States. I don't know what the point would be. It's a bunch of, retarded religious fanatics, mistaken religious fanatics. And near as I can tell, China has an accurate religion. So does Japan. Most of the Orient does. If you want to see the proof of it, compare the crime rates in Japan versus that of the United States, or China versus the U.S. violent crime, crimes against persons, crimes against property. I mean, there's no comparison. It's a tiny fraction in the Orient versus anywhere Christianity establishes itself as the main religion, particularly where the Jesuits, holy quote-unquote Roman Empire, establishes itself. And the Orientals actually successfully implement what the Christian church says that Jesus and God want, whereas the Christians fail miserably at implementing it. Ought to indicate something. It's just a waste of breath to try to convince anybody over here of it. They figure they got the right to go kill 152 million people. God tries to help and expect no consequence. They figure they can go and kill 1 million innocent people in Iraq. Do the same thing Adolf Hitler did to Poland. And expect there's not going to be any consequence over it. It's like it's some kind of God-given right or something. But China knows better. China knows better. So do the Japanese. Like either one of those see full well that whoever was responsible for that, who committed that offense, their territory is going to lose as many people as they sentenced to slow suffering, starvation, death, which currently is 152 million people. I see this as a potential leverage that could solve the situation and keep it from getting any worse, keep it from getting to where there has to be justice and vengeance for all 512 million people who were sentenced to starvation, death. The main hope for that, near as I could tell, would lie with China. Now, China has the power to destroy the United States economy anytime they feel like it. All they got to do is not buy U.S. Treasury securities and dump all the ones they already have on the open market, and the value of the U.S. dollar will plummet to zero in the span of a week. I mean, now basically, I'm tired of making huge contributions and getting crapped all over, being without what I need, having to be hanging on by my economic fingernails, and this situation being this way after being beat down into the ghetto for like the last 25 years, seeing my potential flushed down a toilet, vast numbers of people I should have been able to help get screwed instead, including the Chinese to some respectable degree. I mean, it comes a point, where it's like, how much more crap are you going to tolerate? Particularly after a bunch of maggots you could squash like an ant. And the odds are, without some considerable economic improvement in the next 2 or 3, 4 months here, I'm just going to get tired of it, use spiritual attack on myself, and get off this faggot defected planetoid. If I do that, there's going to be justice and vengeance for all 512 million of them people that starved to death. Every last one of them, not just 152 million of them. I'm sure this is a foreign concept to people that follow a mistaken religion, but the Chinese should see it coming a mile away. So it makes sense for China to do that, to dump those treasury securities if that's how it comes down. Just to basically get out with what part of their economic ass left intact that they can get out with is for self-preservation economically. What I need from China is for China to hold their economic nuclear weapon up to the head of the government over here and threaten to use it in order to try to fix this and keep the situation, the spiritual insult, from getting any worse than it already has gotten. Threaten to destroy their true God, the God of money. I don't think they'd be willing to have China kill their God. And it's not as if Europe is a safe haven for China. Gold would be commodities that they can take possession of. And rubles, near as I can tell, would be the only safe bet for China. You might have noticed there's a pattern of seismic activity centered around December 21st. It dates back all the way to December 23rd, 1988. Because of the alignment, gravity is the carrier of anything psychic, empathic, spiritual, and that's when there's the maximum gravitational alignment with the larger universe. Through the core of the galaxy, when the sun, the earth, the core of the galaxy all line up on the same plane. And that's why that goes on during that period of time, most often. If nothing else, China needs to be watching the situation here. If I decide to leave, if I end up dying off, China has until December 21st to get out with their ass, to dump those treasury securities and get the hell out of Dodge before it gets really bad. Be able to at least get something out of that mountain of paper they got before it turned completely worthless. I'm thinking there's a better way of dealing with it, and China has the means to implement it simply by threatening to dump those treasury securities. Not just the ones here, but the ones in Europe, the ones in Limey land, Nazi land, Dago land, South America, wherever the faggot Fourth Reich or the Jesuits have established themselves. Not the best place for their assets to be tied up. There's going to be spiritual warfare over this. It's just a question of how much of it there's going to be. Personally, I feel sorry for Japan. Japan had the common sense to recognize it was a spiritual matter and attempt to apologize, save themselves from any further trouble in that respect. Yet the tsunami in March 2010, I seriously doubt that it had anything to do with just the fact that they're in a geoseismically active area. Unfortunately, though, they're going to take a huge economic hit before this is all done, because their two largest customers are either going to get decimated or destroyed. And if you've seen the spiritual warfare that's gone on since December 23rd, 1988, it's probably some of the best advice anybody could give economically for Japan or China. Both need to find something different for their people to be doing, unless they want tens of millions of their people begging in the street because they don't have a job anymore, because they don't have any customers to sell to anymore. Hopefully the Speedbox can go a long way toward bringing back a lot of small farms, give people something to do for a living. If China can come up with some economic proceeds, it's not as if China needs me to take the Speedbox the rest of the way. It's pretty much all there in the videos. Anything left over to develop it's not exactly rocket science. The Chinese have the highest average IQ on Earth at 105. They don't need me to have anything more to do with it in order to be able to recognize all the benefit from it and implement it. Nevertheless, getting a grant from China wouldn't hurt. I'd ask it as a personal favor for making the largest economic contribution to China anybody has ever made. China doesn't have a overpopulation problem, they have a food production problem. There simply isn't enough food to go around, and the Speedbox solves that nicely. It can be built in areas that normally cannot support food production, incapable of producing food. It eliminates China's food shortage problem and gives them a limitless, unending supply of fuel and energy. There's no question it's the largest economic contribution to China anybody ever made. So the more gratitude and respect from China I end up getting, the more I appreciate it. And I'm sure the more God would appreciate it. Basically, you got some criminal maggots over here in this country, and over in wherever the faggot Fourth Reich is spread itself around South America, Oceania, Europe, a few other places, the Middle East. Hopefully China will take a stand against it. If China and India implement the Speedbox on a massive scale, it will go a long way toward reducing a large amount of suffering going on in the world, caused mostly by those assholes. I don't know, in a 7-year delay, you might develop and implement the Speedbox since those retards screwed out the deal with the Japanese. They have already decided the economic destruction of Europe and the United States. And near as I can tell, God has the ability to turn it one way or the other to influence the outcome of it. And I witnessed with my own face, God wasn't really too pleased about the assholes pulling their shit. I got my doubts as to how much God would willing to be tipping it in favor of a favorable outcome because of it. Sheer number of people have been screwed over. 5 or 6 billion people significantly. 150 million of them to where they lost their life in a slow suffering death or were sentenced to lose it that way. It's not going to surprise me if God decides to make an example for the rest of the world. It's probably what's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen after I die off. It's just a question of what the scale of it is going to be. Anyway, from China, I would appreciate any help I could get. And I'm sure I could get whatever help I wanted from China 2 or 3, 4 years from now, when it's so blatantly obvious I'm right about the thing, that it is the largest economic contribution to China anybody ever made. But unfortunately, you got the time to wait. I'm just hanging on by my economic fingernails, and you can only go so long without having what you need, I want to go to Russia. One of the main reasons. That's where the herd is. Females outnumber the males 1.9 to 1. Back in the days in America, Native Americans, they'd have to find the herd and go to it so they could eat and survive. You can only survive on like maggot-infested pemmican so long, and then it runs out. You just have to start eating grass, and grass does not have enough nutrition to support survival. You eat grass for a month and remember what buffalo used to taste like. They're basically the same thing. That's where the herd is. Man needs to go to where the herd is. Simply, you got a shortage of females in this country. Not as bad as what's in China, but it's pretty bad. Any of the ones we're dealing with already been taken. Now somebody in my position, can compete with somebody who's got a house and a decent job. And I basically need two things. I need to get the spiritual insult nullified. Then I need to get out and go someplace else beyond the reach of the troublemaking traitors so that they cannot reinstate the spiritual insult. And if it doesn't happen, and I die off without the spiritual insult getting nullified, then it's going to be justice and vengeance for 512 million people instead of 152 million people. I kind of like to prevent that. And near as I can tell, the only way the spiritual insult can be nullified is for the Japanese to show up with the last 7.25 years of my salary, according to the agreement that we worked out, or for me to get the money from the railroad invention that I should have got, that caused the starvation death of all 512 million of them people, by damaging my spiritual connection, eliminating the resources that I had been given to do what I was supposed to be doing, and then damaging my spiritual connection so that I couldn't get the lost resources replaced. I guess actually there'd be a third way of doing it. That'd be for China to use its economic nuclear weapon to beat a settlement out of the U.S. government for silver poisoning. For the FCC lying about silver poisoning. If it hadn't been for those traitors, faggots, lying about silver poisoning so they could get their bank accounts lined by the phone companies who wanted cellular phones and the satellite people that wanted satellite television. I never would have got silver poisoning in the first place. If it was within the power of the Chinese to do that, it wouldn't be a bad idea. I tested out with an IQ of 180 in the second grade in elementary school. I got plenty of witnesses who know Minnesota probably disappeared it out of my school record, but I did get a scholarship to a college prep school with it, and there's plenty of witnesses that know it. If you look on the internet, average salary by IQ, United States, somebody with an IQ of 180 makes an average of $300,000 a year. The Chinese ought to beat triple damages for 33 years out of the U.S. government, $29.7 million. China should be pissed off that the criminal faggots caused China as much as they did. You're talking tens of trillions of dollars in economic damage by crapping all over my potential with their criminal bullshit. The rest of the government just letting the criminal maggots get away with it, not correcting it. And the assholes declaring war on God 7 years ago. It cost China a minimum of $50 trillion in economic damages. So China should be more than pissed off about it. It's not as if they're ever going to get that money back or anything, but I'll take the $3.4 million I should have got off the railroad invention out of it. China can donate the remaining, $25 million to the Shaolin Temple. You might want to accelerate the next round of trade negotiations and bring that to the table first. Obviously, if this doesn't get worked out, it's going to cause even more economic damage to China. China has the opportunity to try to do something about it. If they fail, well, at least they got the opportunity to cash out with what they can cash out and get something for those otherwise worthless pieces of paper before the value of those pieces of paper falls completely down to zero. It's not as if China couldn't short sell the dollar and then dump those treasury securities and get out of the euro at the same time. I guess the Europeans are forced to buy dollars when the price drops, so it's kind of a win-win thing for China. Cash out some of that paper before it becomes completely worthless and they have to burn it. And at least I'll be able to do something for somebody, someplace, China needs to monitor the situation and see if it improves or not. If it doesn't, I don't think you need to be Nostradamus to predict what the outcome is going to be. We need to talk to the Japanese and ask them about the history of this, talk to the Russians. It's good, sound economic advice. Basically, economic survival for China to avoid taking a hit for hundreds of trillions of dollars more damage. Any help from China I could get, I would appreciate it. It would be mutually beneficial. Now, as far as Russia is concerned, I think I got plenty to offer Russia if I go over there. Got this vast herd of lonely Russian females, and I'll be able to alleviate some of the suffering. Finding one and marrying her if I'm not already married, like I asked at Kremlin.ru on the internet. I might be able to get the salary from Japan that I should have been getting for the last 7.25 years if I go over there. At the very least, you can ask the Chinese if I'm mistaken or not. If it becomes proven that I made the largest economic contribution to China anybody ever made, I could ask China for like $200,000 a year for the rest of my life, just a personal favor, and they would grant the favor. So it's not as if I wouldn't be able to pay my way. And then you have the issue of the Soviet religious scams of the past. There may still be some bad karma left over hanging around from that could put Russia on the target list after I die off. I don't know one way or the other. Near as I can ascertain, they quit. They realized, okay, I guess this wasn't such a good idea, screwing with God, pissing God off, after December 23rd, 1988, and they quit doing it. But it may not be enough, because some of the victims of their scam, particularly dangerous religious fanatics, got more troublemaking and dangerous afterward because of it, and caused all this trouble and suffering and death. It'd just be guaranteed, my going over there, marrying a Russian female, being left alone for the rest of my life, would guarantee that any bad karma that's left over would get nullified. It wouldn't exist anymore. Just eliminate the possibility. I think it outranks the possibility of, let's say, the U.S. and Europe committing spiritual suicide and getting wiped out in spiritual warfare. And there's already going to be 152 million people that die off because of that. The damage is already guaranteed to be great. It'll probably take 200 years to recover from it, assuming that's as bad as it gets and it doesn't get any worse. So if Europe or the United States poses a threat to Russia, after I die, that threat is not going to exist anymore. You're too busy trying to repair the damage and recover to pose a threat to anybody. The only real threat would have been over peak oil, the oil running out in the world, making the Siberian oil fields a strategic target for Neanderthal retards. The Speedbox should be able to alleviate that threat. I know Russia is an oil exporting country, but their oil is only going to last so long. It doesn't threaten Russia's oil exports. It actually protects Russia and allows it to export as much of its oil as it wants. All of it that they got left, if they feel like it, at the maximum possible price they can get for it, with the greatest degree of security. Glad to get the Order of Lenin and Hero of Russia awarded to me because of that. The wife deserves it, right? That's over here in the U.S. Got no close family left anymore, except a daughter who's over the age of 18. Wouldn't mind being able to send something back for her, every once in a while, make some income. I just feel it would be better to leave. I have really nothing here as an anchor that could be holding me here. Also, it's a lot of bad experiences. It makes me wonder if there's at least a 50-50 chance someplace else. And if I can survive long enough for the Chinese to come through with some improvement to my position. I'm just concerned that some of the people that cast spiritual insults from the past, leftovers of the stupid religious scams of the past, brain-damaged retards, being able to reinstate the spiritual insult, even if I can get it nullified. As near as I can tell, it would be better to go. So the only question was, coming to this conclusion, would I be able to live with it? As near as I can tell, Russia is like Minnesota used to be before traitorous criminal retards took the place over and started running it. Blizzards, hockey, pine trees. I can learn the rest of the Russian language. Ya doka nimanoga gavru belaruski. Ya gavru belaruski porja. Uj mininada žena spetnaz. Uz нужна žena. Ruska žena. Очень хорошо. I guess there'd be some limits on my freedom of movement or association over there. I can't see how to be any more drastic than what I've been subjected to. I'd be down into the ghetto prison for the last 25 years. I probably have more freedom. What I really need to do, I've taken a lot of damage. I need to get it repaired. I need to retire for a year or two, consult on the Speedbox. China's in a much better position to develop the thing without me having anything to do with it, rather than just getting a grant from China. I wouldn't mind even going to China and working with the Chinese on developing the thing the rest of the way. Being the one who originated, I might have some insights that could only come from me. I really need to get some repair. Go into semi-retirement for a year or two and then come back out and see if there's any potential left as an inventor. I have invented technologies worth hundreds of millions of dollars in the past. It's likely I can do it again. I couldn't tell you what it would be because I haven't invented it yet. But I have to appreciate the situation with the Russian females. Near as I can ascertain, they're more loyal than a dog. They're grateful to have you. You're a valued asset, not a disposable commodity like over here in the States. Like Paul McCartney and that peg-leg female he married, what was her name? He found out about that. You're not going to come home and find all your belongings out on the lawn because you forgot her mother's birthday or some stupid bullshit. I was deprived as an orphan, Spetsnaz. It's very sad. I'm still trying to recover from that destitution. Well, that'd be the place to go and do it. If I went over there, it would actually be because of patriotism to this country. To keep traitors from screwing the United States worse than they already have in spiritual warfare. I swore an oath of patriotism to this country. I don't break an oath once I swear it. I'd have to swear an oath to that one too, I guess. I guess if it came to it, say Neanderthals from the United States trying to invade Russia, I'd do what I could to fight it off. Having two oaths in conflict, but having been married, the two would have to outrank the one. What I'd have to offer, I guess, would be income from China and a potential as an inventor to produce even more money. I'm pretty sure I know how to grow fungus aeroponically. It seems to be a physical impossibility at first. Near as I can tell, it is possible. $250 a pound for morel mushrooms. If it works like I think it does, you'll be able to sell so many morel mushrooms to the French, you'll be able to buy 4 or 5 of those Mistral helicopter carrier ships from France, Spetsnaz, in the span of 10 or 12 years. Shipping trainloads of mushrooms to France. For a Frenchman, a day without a morel mushroom is like a day for a crack hole without crack. Certain other types of mushrooms that sell in Japan fetch pretty high prices. There's also the cattle underground. Been able to figure out a way for the cattle output of Siberia to dwarf that of Texas to a microscopic joke in comparison, even though it gets to be 40, 50 below zero in the winter. Basically an underground plastic barn heated by the body heat of the cattle. A steak on every plate in Russia. Now, as for what I said earlier about Christianity being a mistaken religion, that's not entirely descriptive of what I believe about it. I don't believe the religion itself was mistaken. No religion, as near as I can tell, is perfect. They all have flaws, errors, inconsistencies. But the way Christianity gets interpreted by certain dangerous religious fanatics, it gives all Christians a bad name. That would mean no disrespect to the Russian Orthodox Church or anything. They got a much better comprehension of Christianity than is to be found elsewhere. I'd be proud that a Russian Orthodox Church get me married to my amazing and beautiful Russian wife, if I haven't already been. If I have already been, I guess then, well, I was proud. Yeah, with me, the question of money would be security, stability, a situation, try making jackasses or somebody wanting to be the Lord and me the vassal can basically just wipe out or cause annoyance and trouble and that. I'll just be left alone, some land of my own, enough resources to compensate for the damage caused by silver poisoning. I'm sure Russia remembers or knows a lot about silver poisoning. A bad case of it wipes out your sleep schedule, screws up your ability to have a normal existence. You can't hold a regular job. It's hard to say. Who knows, in Russia that far north, away from the satellite belt, with the low electromagnetic frequency density that they have in Russia, maybe it wouldn't be that much of a problem. You need to get these teeth taken out. Perhaps it couldn't be repaired. But it's not something that would happen overnight. Technically, after the sheer scale of my contribution to hell, I should be able to retire if I feel like it by this time. take up further invention just as a hobby. I believe I can get that from China. In fact, there's no question I get that from China once they've seen enough of it, dealt with it long enough to know beyond any possible doubt I'm right about it, that it's a reliable system that's going to solve their problems, solve the problems in the rest of the world. There probably isn't much that I couldn't ask from China that they wouldn't be willing to give. I mean, that should be a consideration. I'm sure Russia would appreciate the tax income. As far as China is concerned, I'd be perfectly happy to go to China, stay there a while, but I would eventually want to try to get to Russia and get married because of the female situation in Russia, surplus in Russia, the shortage in China, and the fact that Russia has a lot more familiar elements that I'm used to dealing with, the pine trees, the hockey, the blizzards. But I'd be perfectly happy to go hang out in China for a while, participate in the development of the Speedbox. Same thing with Japan. I'd be as happy now to go to Japan as I was 7¼ years ago when I first made the arrangement that included going over there. It should have included, was supposed to include. I think the Chinese and the Japanese know more than just about anybody else. You show some spiritual respect and gratitude, and it comes back. It improves your position. It usually vastly improves your position. That plus the fact that I'm not done as an inventor yet. I figured out a way that should allow almost complete takeover of certain commercial markets, refrigerators and freezers in particular. But in China or Japan's mind, either one, I'm pretty sure they already know. With me, considering that the facts basically prove that this is a spiritual matter, that there could never be a negative loss. They could give me $10 million and they'd probably make $1 billion. That it wouldn't be physically possible for a negative loss to be suffered of any kind. In fact, I'm counting on the Chinese knowing that. And now hopefully the Chinese will be able to make the assessment that I'm right about the Speedbox in time. I mean, I'm way past tired of it being beat down into the ghetto. The rules of the game have changed from what they were over the last 10-20 years. My spiritual function for the last 10-20 years has kept me basically a prisoner here on the cesspool. I had a responsibility to try to meet my spiritual functionality. But now that I've done so, it's an entirely different ball game with a new set of rules. There's limits anymore as to what could keep me here. Now, I'm not going to sit here and just delay the inevitable. I mean, if traitors in this country, traitors to their own country, what is it, Nazi land, whatever, they're intent on destroying their own country, and it gets to be obvious, they just plan on continuing the crap they took all over me and God. There ain't no reason to stay. I can attack myself, get off this faggot, defective planet, and have anything I want, anything I need. And just so you don't get the wrong idea, I wouldn't be doing it to avenge myself on my enemies. I'm going to have my vengeance. My enemy's going to wish they were never born. It's going to happen after I die. That's not going to be my motivation if I decide to leave. All I can tell you is if I get too much more tired of the bullshit than I already am, that's what the result of it's going to be. And there's going to be consequences, which would tend to bring me to Limey land, Nazi land, the Jesuits, the Fourth Reich, whatever. I'm sure you can figure out what all this means. As far as your territories are concerned, if nothing else, I'd be willing to go over there. It's not all that foreign an environment, I guess. It's English speaking. Somewhat easier than learning Russian, I suppose, but not that much easier. Are you going to let a bunch of criminal faggots in some foreign country flush your country down a toilet would be the question. I'm pretty certain, and from a glance, it should be obvious, the reason that I got crapped all over after I started making the combined governments of the United States more than $100 million a year in extra tax income would be that either by foreign infiltration, either the Limeys or the Nazis or somebody else ended up running the place, rather than Americans running America. The most likely explanation would be the British or the Nazis pissed off because the railroad invention cost their countries $50-60 million a year in lost tax income. The thing is, my getting crapped all over caused the starvation, death of hundreds of millions of people, and it's going to come back down on your territory if your people did that and you don't resolve the spiritual insult. take it for what it is. But I say the situation doesn't appear to bode very well for your territories, and if I was you, I'd be making some kind of effort to fix it. The Canadian border crossing up at the 5 freeway north of Seattle, Washington, into British Columbia, had to deal with some Canadian faggots. I go up there bringing the largest economic contribution to Canada or the United Kingdom anybody has ever made. And I have to deal with this Mick retard. I mean, before him, I've met hundreds of Micks. Spud chuckers. Never met one I didn't like before this wanker. The dude doesn't have the brains to be working security for Toys R Us. Accused me of trying to bring dope into his country. Search my damn card. Got 70 hard drives in my car. At the time I had like 19 laptop computers. It doesn't occur to the dude, oh yeah, he's trying to bring dope into the country. Destroyed my prized Vic Venturi speakers. Some of the best speakers ever made by man. You have to go to a Bose 301 or 901 or a Klipsch to get a better speaker. Which is inherently faggot. Destroy something that considerable. That minister up there and that wanker Mick have probably sentenced a few numerous millions of people in the United Kingdom to death by spiritual warfare. Would be my personal guess, just by causing another almost complete year of delay in the development and implementation of the Speedbox. It's too bad, so the British used to have some respectable security. Turned into a bunch of wankers. I guess after the embarrassment of the Falkland Islands, anything is possible with the British anymore that way. It's not what they used to be. It's kind of sad, really. So yeah, the British appear to have mutated into a bunch of retards. If on my trip here I actually deliver a copy of this DVD to the British consulate, it'll be the last thing I do on my trip as an afterthought, would be my personal guess. I would have thought the Queen herself, with her 12 cargo trunks full of wardrobe, would have been here to personally apologize for that. Maybe the wankers up there can redeem their pathetic existence by admitting to the fact that I left a hard drive up there, pulled it out of my laptop and gave it to them, containing all of the Speedbox SketchUp files that were used to create some of the earlier animations, none of which are on this DVD. These are all considerably advanced past the level that the Speedbox had been developed to at that time, but it shows a pattern of development that dates back 5 years. I still have all the original SketchUp files that created all of these animation videos. The Sony Vegas workshop files that made some of the videos. User Terraforming Master on YouTube shows some of the older videos, so some of the new ones that I've put on there, but I've been having to deal with internet censorship too, so it's hard to say what you might see there. For all I know, you could go there and see porno movies that some jackass put up there. But some of the videos show my developing the Speedbox back in Oklahoma 2-3 years ago, 2009. Last year in 2010, I had a prototype Speedbox, almost 9/10 of the way built, but I kept getting hounded by the crack soap opera, and then they raised my rent, so I left the heat, the crack soap opera, that having to deal with paying twice as much for the place than it was really worth. So I don't need this bullshit, packed up what I had and hit the road. But there are witnesses, evidence, documentation that does prove that I'm the one who developed it, in case there's some question mark hanging over it. Now if by some freak chance you can get to YouTube and it isn't censored, the two relevant videos would be the Dawn of the Aeroponic Speedbox Part 2 and the Axeman video that shows the other side of the trailer. In both videos you see the station wagon sitting there, you see the trailer. Yeah, I guess the Limeys and the Nazis could consider that a lesson, but it ain't wise to go pissing me off or pissing God off too far. So yeah, get me out of the cesspool, show some damn respect and gratitude for the scale of my contribution and some apology for the past. I'm sure we can be all best pals. On the other hand, if this doesn't work out and it keeps going further downhill, don't say I didn't tell you over there in Europe that you're not going to like what ends up happening. And don't say there wasn't no fact or evidence that indicated that I could be right about it either, because there was plenty. I'm always right when it comes to the important things. So this is all going to come down to China. The outcome of this, pretty much all of it's going to come down to the speed at which China is able to assess this And it's in plenty of people's best interest that they make certain that the right people in China get a hold of it and assess it. Japan as well. Japan is no slouch when it comes to deutered up advanced technological issues. And admittedly, this one does have some technological complication to it. There's nobody better suited than Japan or China, possibly even Germany, to do the assessment. It needs to get done. It needs to get done fast. Therefore, the more people, the more groups assessing it, the better the odds that this will have a more favorable outcome to the territories that could be negatively affected by it. It's kind of sad that it ends up having a dark side to it, but I'm not the one who created it. A bunch of criminal maggots crapping all over a spiritual matter, and continue to do so to this day, are the ones to blame for that. As far as Russia and China are concerned, maybe a few other countries, it could be there's a pattern in the United States. Most countries, somebody at genius level or higher, their potential gets encouraged and preserved and promoted. I'm pretty sure we've had a case of a considerable degree of malevolent foreign infiltration in the United States, and I'm probably just part of a pattern of this type of potential getting crapped all over and flushed down a toilet because the malevolent foreigners concluded that it would damage the country even further if you wipe out its best assets. I'm sure if you're trying to destroy or damage a country, it's probably true, but I wouldn't underestimate that there might be quite a few other people that have been beat down that might come, maybe in less than perfect condition, who might come to you to ask for help, and it might be worth your time to try to pay attention to what they say and ignore the condition. I doubt personally that I'm the only one that it's happened to. It would explain quite a few things. As far as the retards who are doing that, in this particular case, they didn't do their cause any particular great favor. They're going to find that out the hard way. Just a question of how painful the lesson for them is going to be. Don't make the mistake the Canadians made. You'd be robbing your territory of vast resources and assets. Now, in the United States, there might be some retards who could hear all this and still mistake me for being a traitor. But I am not the traitor. I'm the solution to the problem of there being traitors. I can't say I like the idea, to tell you the truth, but there's too much potential for spiritual trouble if I stay here. It just takes one group of assholes from the past, pull the wrong bullshit, and they'll manage to reinstate the spiritual insult, and there'll be plenty of spiritual trouble that comes from it. Won't benefit the United States. As near as I can tell, the best way for me to benefit the country here is to get away from the actual treason and go back to doing what I was supposed to be doing. In this case, eventually ending crude oil imports into the United States. Think about it.